This is the pair of PCBs for the recreation of the organiser, and there were quite a lot of problems on these. There were sort of 25 faults here, missing tracks and things, and about another 20 on the power PCB, which sounds like a lot, but these were really very much prototypes. Now, after version 1.0 comes version 1.1 in a different colour, so that I don't confuse the boards, because they are pretty similar when you just look at them initially. There's not a lot of difference in the layout. There's a little bit of extra circuitry here, and this is sort of changed up here. There's extra circuitry there as well, but anyway, different colour. And the board's got quite a few changes mechanically as well. So if we look at the power PCB, that will now fit in the case, and there's a hole here so that it can actually be screwed down as the original is into the case. Previously it was held just with the connections between the boards. The connections between the boards, they've been moved slightly so they now line up, which is nice, so you can just plug your 0.1 inch headers in and you don't have to bend the pins and fiddle around with it or anything. The plastic cover that goes over and provides the top slot mechanical arrangement, that's got some screw holes now. These screw holes here, you can see them here, were missing on the original board. Also, you can see on the back I've actually got some connections for the beeper, the buzzer on the back case. That's this one here. So on some back cases there's springs which provide the contacts, and that's what these pads are for. On this one there's just wires. I think on the early ones they had wires coming off the buzzer and they were soldered onto these pads, so either will work. It's like the original board. So the boards arrived about a day ago, and I've already, if I unscrew it, I've already made up a set. It took a few hours of soldering components on the board, and there we go. So this is version 1.1, and this has springs for the beeper, and that works. The beeper does sound when you press a button or you run the beep command. And there's the populated boards. And so far I haven't really found much in the way of problems. The hole in this power PCB is a little bit out, but you can still screw the board in. I also made a sort of design, high-level design error or miscalculation when I took off a regulator. There used to be a 5-volt regulator here, and that was driving the Pico. That is now on the power PCB, and I can't really remember why I put it there. But what that means is this processor board can't run as a standalone board anymore because there's no power to the Pico. I think you could run it standalone into the USB, but the USB socket isn't accessible unless you cut away large amounts of the case. So I don't use that. Other than that, there's no real problems that I've found. I've programmed the room. That has now got some dedicated programming pads here. You short the jumper and then you can connect USB to serial in there, 3.3 volt USB to serial, and that will actually let you program the module, and that's necessary in order to get Bluetooth working. The default code only has Wi-Fi. On this one I've put two 2 megabit serial EEPROMs. They are 256k bytes each, so there's half a megabyte of serial EEPROM flash here. This was the larger chips that I wanted to try out. They seem to be working, sort of. Some of my test modes actually report that they are working, so I've soldered them on the right way round, even though the manufacturer didn't really decide that they needed a pin 1 marker, which is ridiculous. But I still can't dump and restore to them. I don't really know why. The page size has changed, but I don't think that should make a difference, and maybe it takes a bit longer to write, but didn't seem to work. The real-time clock is working, and I don't think there's any problems now with having battery voltage on it, but for some reason the alarm output of the real-time clock seems to be holding the, well, not the pico, but the power circuit on. So the real-time clock is capable of powering up the unit just like the original organiser, except it uses an alarm output rather than a simple counter that will power it up every sort of 30 minutes or so, which means this can power up every 30 minutes if you want it to, or it could power up 5 days time. So that obviously needs to turn the power circuit on, and that is currently stuck on for some reason. I don't know why. I think it might be just settings I've got in the chip or something. It might be a hardware problem, I'm not sure. So you can't turn it off, which is a bit irritating. You have to pull the battery out at the moment, but hopefully I can fix that somehow. But what is quite nice is this does actually plug straight in, so the connectors on there actually fit and work. Yeah, so I'm going to try and sort out the final problems I've got with these, but this has been built up and it just sort of worked. So there's actually no wires on either of these PCBs. They are bodge free at the moment. This is also using the OLED display frame, the 3D printed frame in here. So this has got one of those holding the OLED in. It actually maybe could do with being moved up a little bit, but it's still very visible in the display area. Let's put this back together. This is the programming connection for the Pico here, the SWD, and we put that on. I haven't got the plastic in the top for the top slot connector at the moment, and I'm using a PP3 battery clip here to actually connect the battery. I need to put a screw in here because the springs on the beeper are actually pushing the case apart. If it's wired in or there's no springs on the back connector, that doesn't happen. So let's turn it on. And on. The only thing is now, once it's on, the real-time clock's holding that on, and it won't turn off again if I try and turn it off manually. Also, the restore didn't work because we got the copyright message, so the restore from EEPROM didn't work. But if I go into the calculator and type something, and then type something silly, you can hear the beep there. It's lower frequency because the whole thing is running at a slower frequency than the real organiser. So hopefully I can speed it up a bit. It might be possible to overclock it, but that chucks out all the timing for everything else, like the RS-232 connection to the wireless module. So this is a version 1.1 with no bodge wires, recreation of the Organiser 2. So I'm probably going to make up some more of these version 1.1 boards and just check that there's no component tolerance issues or anything like that. If I build up a few more and they work, then I think everything's sort of okay. Still some problems with the code though, just niggly things like the games pack doesn't actually seem to run properly. I have tried. What we've got here's a games pack. If I turn it off, it dumps to EEPROM and then stays on. Actually, oh, I think that's a flat battery. Did that before. Yeah, if I plug the games module in, there you go. You've got the data pack in there. Turn it on. It's restoring, but it isn't. Copyright message because it's reset. Select English, and if we have a look, there's the games. So it's reading data packs and everything. That's fine. I've still got a problem where I can't write to RAM packs for some reason, and I don't seem to be able to access segmented data packs where there's an extra latch for doing the higher address lines, but hopefully I can sort that out. That was on the version, where is it? Here it is. That was on the version 1.0 recreation as well, so nothing's changed with this set of PCBs. Let's see. Let's go for French instead of English. There we go. So the multi-language facility of the organiser will still work because we're just running the normal ROM here. We're not doing any translations in my code. That is just doing whatever the original ROM would do if it's a multilingual one. So I'll try German. There you go. Then it will work. The only thing that won't is the special meta menu I've got. That is in my code, and that is only in English at the moment. But there we go. So it will operate in any languages that are in the ROM that it is emulating. But yeah, so this was pretty easy to put together compared to the 1.0. There's no wires on there, you just put the components on, put it together and program the Wi-Fi module, and that should give you Bluetooth. I haven't tested that yet, but I'm pretty sure that will work. But yeah, and then fail to turn off. Oh, it's not off, is it? Of course. How do you turn it off? Out. Hey, dumping. What if it'll do the strange display? Oh, no, it went back to the main menu, but I've seen that display flashing before, but only when I try and turn it off, so I assume that was something to do with powering down. Maybe it isn't, I have to check that, but that's the only strange thing I've seen that's different to the version 1.0, and that's that strange strobing of the display. And the power on-off circuit has been changed quite a bit actually to make it more resilient against battery voltage, so hopefully this will run off the DC power supply as well, which I've got here. This was a 10.4 volt supply, and up until I used that on a test I'd been running off the 9 volt rechargeable battery or a power supply, and obviously it was about maybe 3 or 4 volts higher, because it was actually, I think it was floating up to about 13 offload, 13 volts. And that higher voltage actually caused damage in the power circuit on my version 1.0 prototype, but I've fixed that now. Hopefully that's okay, and it should be able to run off that, but I don't really want to try it here. What I'll do is I'll either make a sacrificial one, or I'll make a board where I only populate the power circuit components, because I don't want to blow up the Pico or the wireless module, because they're very difficult to get off the PCB. Once they're soldered in, they're sort of almost permanent. I did manage it on the version 1.0 once, but it involves destroying the Pico, although I think the Pico was actually damaged anyway, so it didn't really matter. So building up just the power part of the circuit and then testing that and making sure I can run off the higher sort of 12-13 volt supply is probably the way to go. And then later on, if that works, or once I get it working, I'd populate the PCBs fully and have another unit. But yeah, quite pleased with that. I seem to have fixed all my problems. I went through my lists and fixed everything, and that seems to have worked, apart from a few sort of things that aren't, well, they aren't really problems, I suppose. So the problem with the regulator means that you have to run this as a 2-board set, because the Pico won't power up, but you've still got the option of taking the power PCB off and putting something else on. So you could build another one of these with no slots, and you could have SD cards, no top slot. You could have I2C there on some other connector, or you could use this connector to do I2C or whatever you want, and interface differently through the top slot, and or the data pack slots as well. So it's still sort of a modular system, it's just that you now have to have a second board. You can't just run the display, keyboard and processor PCB as a single unit off the battery, which you can do on the 1.0 because it's got that 5 volt regulator here. So what I could do is I could move that 5 volt regulator back onto this board for a 1.2 board, but I don't know how useful it is really being able to run this as a single unit just with the front, because you've got no Wi-Fi, you've got no data packs. You don't even actually have the serial EPROMs because they're on this board. So I didn't really want to put those on the main board because you might want to change those for something else, like an SD card, where you dump and restore from SD card instead of serial EPROM. The reason for the serial EPROM was to make it more like the features of the original organiser. But you could dump to SD card, so use that for storage. But anyway, it's still modular, and you can still make different versions of this. It's just that when you run it, you've got to have two PCBs there. I don't know if that's really worth bothering to change. And attempt to turn off again and see if we get that strange strobing display. No, just back to the menu, which is what it would do, because when you turn back on it would restore the stack and go back to the main menu, so that's really what it should do.